Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be going into how to make mini-maps. So we're going to be using render textures, a second camera, tiny bit of code, not really much. So it's not going to be that complex of a tutorial, but obviously lots of games have mini-maps for multiple different genres, so I'm going to show you how to set up a simple one. And then obviously if people want a more advanced one for whatever reason, obviously I could go into that, but for this video we'll keep it simple. I want to start off by thanking my patrons. Thanks to Michael, Paul Robinson, Forborn, and Wesley for their donations on Patreon. If anyone else would like to help out, then link in the description below. One other thing to mention before we start is my new headset comes tomorrow, so this should be the last video where it's potentially slightly fuzzy at points. But yeah, that's arriving tomorrow, or maybe I doubt it'll arrive any time later today. So yeah, just tomorrow's video from then on should all be good. And also, I'm going to mention this on my actual channel post page thing, however you do that. I've done it once before. About for the new year, I'm going to start actually like editing videos properly with software. So the videos will seem a bit, nicer and more well organized, and I'll have actual cuts and stuff, and the audio will be better, and all the editing stuff. And also, I would like people in the community, if they want to, I'm going to have like a little competition for people to make an intro. If they need anything like the Dapper Dino logo or anything like that, then I can send them the raw PNG of it. If they would like, just contact me somehow on like Discord or something. But then obviously the winner, or the people who enter, if anyone enters, I'll pick a winner with some other people and we'll use that as the intro. And then obviously I'll give you credit. So if you want to enter, then just message me if you make me intro. But anyway, let's get into the video. So I'll mention that again at some other point anyway in future videos before I decide the winner. So currently I've just got a scene, simply got the player in the center and some enemies. I've just made cylinders instead of capsules. So what you want to be able to do is, first of all, you want to move the player. Now let's just put this back. Alright, so the player move script, let's just quickly add a move script. Just really simple, just WASD, forward, backwards, left, right. Add a, what? What's going on here? I don't have a script called adder. Oh, I do. I don't know why I have a script called adder. Anyway, move script. So this is on the player. Make sure it's on the player. Okay, so I'll just quickly add some simple stuff. So all we need to do is have a TLS field private float speed, and in the update we'll just get vector free. We'll call it keyboard input is equal to new vector free, and we need to get input dot get axis. What's the axis called? It's horizontal, and then the y will be 0, and then the x will be input dot get axis vertical, like so. That should be right. And with that we can then say transform dot translate keyboard input times speed times time dot delta time, so that it's consistent. I mean, to be honest, we're not doing about like a proper player controller or anything here, so it's not our goal to make it as smooth or efficient as possible. I just want it to work. So that should simply let us move the player forwards. Let's just press play. If I set the speed to like 5, we can move it in different directions. Okay, that's step 1 done. Step 2, I'm just going to move the camera. So this is our actual camera that we would play with. So, you might want this to be a first-person camera if it's, an FPS or whatever. But for the sake of this, what we'll do is we'll just raise this. So let's say this is just our game view, okay? This is our game view. Why not? So now when we press play, it's just like this, right? We can move this play around. I've not put colliders on. I need to set the speed properly, but the point is, right, we've got these. They don't have colliders. It doesn't matter. Let's just set the speed now. So now that we've got this, we need to have a second camera, okay? Because this is going to be the camera that we play with, but we're going to need another camera to render the minimap. So if we go and create a UI camera, like so, I'm blind. It's not a UI camera. What am I on about? So it's simply a game object that has a camera component and an audio listener. We can remove the audio listener because otherwise you'll get something saying that there's multiple audio listeners in the scene. Obviously, audio listeners do the job of making your headphone like surround sound depending on where sounds are coming from in direction to the camera. But anyway, this camera here should be, well, it doesn't really matter where it is at the start, but it just needs to basically rotate to face down. So we want an X of 90. And we also want it to come up because it's currently in the ground. So what you want to do is you want to set it to a height, so maybe around here. Now, once you've got this height, you want to change the render type. Well, not render type, what's it called on here? Projection. So perspective obviously has depth, and you can see, as you go outwards, you can see the kind of inside of the shapes, whereas orthographic is completely flat, and you would expect these cameras to be orthographic. Now, one thing about orthographic is the Y height doesn't matter as such, but as you notice at different heights you get different effects. You only get shadows if you're in a certain range, because in your graphic settings there'll be a range on which shadows get rendered, because obviously you don't want to render shadows to things that are like miles away. So you should pick a height that's not too high that it ignores your shadows, but like, you know, high enough about there. I'd say I'm going to go for 30. Why not? And then what we can do is we can actually tweak the size of what we see with this. So let's say we want to see like this much, right? There we go, that's the size. Now with this, we want to output not to our screen, right? We don't want to press play and see like this. This isn't a mini-map. If anything, this is like the mini-map, but entirety, right? This is like the entirety of the mini-map. Also, obviously the shadow's been rendered, but we'll ignore shadows for now. I can actually just rotate the directional light. We could just get rid of shadows and make it be exactly 90. But I don't like that. I want at least a bit of shadow. But yeah, what we want... Oh, I don't like that actually. There we go, some realistic shadows. So what you want to do now with this camera, we'll call it mini-map camera so we know what it is. So mini-map camera. As you see here, we have this thing called the target texture. So by default, we'll just render to the screen, but we want to render to the UI. So what we'll do is we will go UI canvas. I'm just going to tweak this. So scale of screen size, I am working on a 1920 by 1080 monitor. Just scale that, and this is all okay. Screen space overlay, whatever. So now we've got a canvas. There's nothing on it, but we've got a canvas. Put it right at the top. And on this canvas, we're going to add a panel, which basically is just an image. Now, this image, we're going to make it fully opaque. I don't really like this. We can choose the color in a second if we want. Press 2D to get a like flattened view of the UI. And if you press to this one here, or T, I think it's T. Yeah, T lets you rescale UI easily. You shouldn't use scale like this unless you have to. Most of the time it's not a good idea to. You should just resize this. So if we say the minimap, you know, as traditionally is always at the top right, and it's pretty much always square or circle, but the point is it's the same proportion left and right. So we'll go for 350 by 350. It seems that fits about right. Now I might also offset it a bit. So if this was 0, 0, minus 100 minus 250 minus 250. So now we've got it to the top right. Now, if you're actually working on your UI properly, you would do proper scaling where it clips to the corner of the screen and scales as you get smaller. Because now if we go down to like 5x4, it does stay at the top right in the same place, but the problem is it uses up more of the screen. And I'm not going to spend this video talking about UI scaling and canvases. I have a short video on that, and I'm going to do more in the future. But for now, it just clips to the top right, well, sticks, whatever you would call it. It pivots, whatever, is at the top right of the screen. So as the top right moves, that'll move, it's fine. Now, it's currently blank, and we're going to leave that blank. We'll leave that as a background, so I can just say minimap background. And then on this, we're going to have another UI image. But this one is going to be a bit smaller, so we'll just Alt-click this to set it to the scale, and then we'll Shift-drag it in to make it a little bit smaller, and set it to the middle. So we've got it a square, but it's a bit smaller. Now, this image can be the minimap render or something like that. Now what we need to do is we need to pass in to our camera, the minimap camera, a target texture which is of type render texture.
So if we right click, create render texture, there it is, custom render texture. Oh no, that must be new. But anyway, render texture. Or maybe I'm just silly. So we'll call it mini map camera. Now currently it's just, you know, black image 256 by 256. But we want to basically output to this. This is currently just default black square. We can actually say to the UI to use this as our sprite. No, we can't, sorry. We need to change on the, not on the minimap background, on the renderer. We can't use image, we have to use the component raw image. And then we pass in this texture. Now, as you see, nothing happens, right? It's black on here, but that's just default. We don't see anything because nothing's being rendered to it. So we need to tell something to output to this render texture. This is like the intermediate bit, right? So the camera is going to render whatever it sees to this texture, which is what this is showing on screen, the minimap render. So if we go to our camera and drag in this render texture to its target texture, as you see, the actual camera, whatever it sees, is now being put to that UI sprite there, which we're dragging in as a texture. So that now when I move, as well as getting my own view, which can be whatever I want, I also get the top-down view on there, which is quite fancy. Now, obviously, there's a few more things you might want to do. So first of all, something simple, you might want to make it so that the minimap follows the player. So what we'll do is we'll add a script to the minimap camera called minimap camera. And this is the tiny bit of coding we're going to do. So just give it a second. So all we need to do is get reference to the player. So serialize field, private, transform, player, transform. So we can have reference to where the player is and stuff, so we can position ourselves accordingly or rotate ourselves accordingly. Though I'm not going to bother with rotation because the player doesn't rotate in this, it's forward, left, right, back. So we're going to say in the private void late update. The reason why we use late update, so update happens every frame, late update happens every frame, but any code in late update happens after update. Just like how void awake and start both get called in the first frame, the await gets called first. So if you need any code at the start that specifically happens before other start code, you would put it in awake and then the rest in the start. So just like this, you would use update and fixed update for moving and physics. Late update is for stuff that you want to wait until that stuff's been calculated. The best way to put it is, we're going to have an update somewhere, so in here, where we move the player, and this late update is going to get called right after that, because we want to, if we don't do this in the late update, what will happen is the minimap will kind of lag behind the player by a frame, and it is quite noticeable actually. Late update will basically wait until the character's moved and then do this code, rather than the other way around, which would obviously have delay. So we need to basically store a vector free, because it needs to know where to go to. We're moving it around, so we need to tell it its position, so target position is equal to. Now, we want to basically set it to where the player is, but up in the sky. So what we can do is we can say this is equal to the player transform dot position. So we're storing the player's position, whatever that is, but we want to go up by a certain value. So serialize field, private float, y offset. Sorry. Target position dot y is equal to y offset. Now, I guess you could say technically plus equals if you wanted it to be like this y offset now, what it's setting it to that value, whereas we could add it instead. So it's up to you. I'm just going to say this is what we set it to. So if the player went up like a mountain, for example, the camera wouldn't go up with them. It would stay at the same height. I mean, it's up to you. You might want that, actually, to be honest. Fine, well, we'll go with plus equals. Offset. And then we're going to say transform.position, so we're going to move the camera equal to the target position. That's where we want to go to. So every frame, we're going to basically get where the player is and push the camera up by that amount that we're going to like define here. So if we pass in player and the y offset to be, what is it currently? We're currently at a y of 30. So let's just go with 30 then, I guess. 30 works. So it should now, when we move up, down, left and right, forwards, back, whatever,
as you see, the camera actually moves with the player. So in reality, you only need a minimap to play now, because it gives you better information on the surroundings than the actual gameplay does from the camera angle we're currently at. But the point is, now you can see that. So that's task 1, display the minimap. Task 2, make it follow you. And then the task 3 to end off with is, let's say in your game you've got like an actual map, right, rather than just rendering the scene. You're going to obviously render the map and move along it. So it's quite similar. But let's say your enemies, you don't want to actually like visually see what's going on. You want to have a map with like red dots for enemies and yellow dots for quests or whatever you want, right? So instead of having these enemies rendered, for now I'll leave the player rendered, but we want this camera. One cool thing about cameras is they have what's called a culling mask. Now by default it's everything, and that means that everything gets rendered. But objects in your scene have layers, so default, whatever, some stuff, canvas is UI. You can actually choose what to render and what not to render on this minimap camera, basically. So the minimap camera technically doesn't want to render UI. that's one thing you don't want to render. Obviously your main camera does, because when you open up a UI, you want to be able to see it on your main camera. You don't want to like see it on here by accident, so just turn off UI. You want to leave most of this other stuff on, as far as I'm aware, yeah. But now we need to create a new layer for enemies. So, edit, settings. I'm still getting used to the new settings. It's in the layers. Where have they moved it all? Tags and layers. So we're going to add one called enemies. Right, enemies. So what we're going to do is we're going to say select all of these. Well, actually, no, sorry. We're going to create. Let's go back to that. So we've got enemies, which is something we don't want to render. So let's say like render to mini map. So enemies, yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to select all these enemies, which are all the cylinders. So that's all of them selected. And we're going to mark them, these are enemies, okay? Now we don't render them because this minimap camera on its culling mask doesn't render enemies, okay? Now on all of these enemies, let's just say like, if I did this, does it make multiple prefabs? No. Fine, I'll just do it to all of them individually. So if I shift select and I do add a sphere to them, let's just, have they all got a sphere now? Yeah, they do. Okay, they got a sphere. Now, if we search sphere, just because it's simple, because they're all spheres, we'll make a material that shows up on the map. So, material, just call it red. We'll give all these spheres red and change it to be red. Now, I don't know what's going to look like necessarily, but we'll see. So we've basically given them all these spheres. Now, we don't want to see these because this is for the minimap. So what we can do is we can now say on the main camera, so the camera we look through here, we render everything except the minimap stuff. And then we go to these spheres that I just had selected and set those to the render to minimap layer. So our normal camera doesn't see them because it doesn't see render to minimap layered things. But our minimap camera, we can now say we want you to render these things. So now we actually see red dots for the enemies, regardless of what they are. We see red dots. Now, yeah, you still see the shadows. That's something else to look into. But the point is, you see red dots for these enemies, regardless of what they are. So let's say, you know, this enemy over here, this cylinder, is actually a cube, for example. He's a cube monster. I don't know. And he's now at height of 1 because he's a cube, whatever. Remove component. Box collider. You know, we've got this different enemy now. But he's still, as you see on here, he's rendered on the minimap as a red dot, but in the world you can't see that because it's only for the minimap camera. So yeah, that's basically this video done. I hope this helped you. I hope if you were looking how to do minimaps, this has helped you. If you've got any more questions, then feel free to ask them below. I'm hoping my microphone didn't mess up too much this video, but obviously, as I said, from tomorrow onwards, it will be all good again. Obviously, thanks for people who have put up with that over the last, say, week probably or less, while it's been a bit dodgy until eBay finally delivers my new headset. But anyway, if you haven't already liked, subscribe, it'd mean a lot. But apart from that, thanks for watching and goodbye.